Can we feed our horses to help prevent founder? Absolutely. And it's important to look at two things: what we're feeding and how we're feeding it. And then when it comes to what our horses eat on a daily basis, we want to consider the NSC value. That is the non-structural carbohydrate value of a feed or forage. Now, when we're looking at carbohydrates in a plant, the starches and sugars, we can look at the structural carbohydrates, which are the actual pieces of the plant that give it structure, the skeleton of the plant. The non-structural carbohydrates, the NSCs of a plant, are where the plant stores its energy to grow and reproduce and things like that. These sugars and starches, the NSCs, are also very delicious for our horses. And when we look at our horse's diet, oftentimes our bagged feeds will have an NSC value on it. And ideally, to help prevent founder in high-risk horses, we're going to be looking for an NSC value of 10-ish or so or less. And beware of bagged feeds, which only list low sugar, low starch. You actually want to call the manufacturer and get that actual NSC value. I called the manufacturer last year after looking into their feed. The bag said low sugar, low starch. The NSC value was actually 18. And the same is true for a lot of senior feeds because they're packed full of molasses. The sugar and starch values, those NSC percentage, might be too high for some senior horses at risk of laminitis. Your horse's forage can also be considered low NSC if it's a grass type of forage instead of a legume. And we also need to talk about a horse's pasture. Obviously, during the spring and the fall, the sugar levels in that grass is going to be a lot higher than at other times in the year. And you need to let your horse graze according to his laminitis risk and his obesity levels, if any, and his risk for colic and things like that. The best methods to feeding your horse a diet that helps reduce the risk of founder is to feed them slowly as possible. Small bites, small volumes, especially if you give like a grain type meal. And just keep the food in front of them for as long as you can. We're trying to mimic them being out on like scrub and things like that, where they're just eating a tiny bit over many, many hours. And our pastures don't always provide that. Sometimes this is just way too lush and way too thick, and they can eat too much too fast. So when you're feeding your hay forage, hay nets, or some sort of standing hay device that is a slow feeder is the way to go. When they are out in the paddocks, your horse could wear a grazing muzzle, and these are designed to do two things: reduce the volume that they're eating and the speed at which they are eating it. Wearable hay net for their faces. Fashion colors. And you can find slow feeders for grains and pellets and other types of bagged feeds. They usually look like this, where they have some sort of bowl type apparatus and a lot of little pockets, or maybe it's a bowl type apparatus and there's lots of mountains and topography that your horse has to eat around. You could also add a hindgut buffer into your horse's meals. Hindgut buffers are designed to temper the pH changes that happen when a horse eats a lot of sugary, starchy things, and a large volume of that hits their hindgut all at the same time. That's part of the mechanism for what goes in their mouth affecting their feet, and that is the volume and how quickly it travels to the hindgut. And the hindgut buffer just kind of says, pump the brakes a little bit. Incidentally, the slow feeding of horses helps with a lot of other things besides helping to prevent laminitis and founder. We're talking about helping to prevent ulcers. It's better for their brains, it's better for their bodies, and it's a more natural way of feeding your horse. And your vet is always going to be the best resources to help you decide how at risk your horse is for laminitis and gas colic and things like that. Equine nutritionists are also really wonderful resources for helping your horse have a nice low NSC value diet that is very balanced. And your local ag extension service, which is sometimes part of a university in your area, can help you with all types of pasture grass, knowing what's best for your horse, and can give you an idea of what might work in your own pastures.